Welcome to Living, Learning, and Leading with Purpose with me, Dr. Wajida Small. This channel is for those who want to live fulfilled lives, grow personally and professionally, and develop into influential and impactful leaders in their organizations, industries, and communities. Through my blog, podcast, and books, I share the best stories, lessons learned, and advice to help you live, learn, and lead with purpose. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Leading with Purpose podcast. I am your host, Dr. Wajida Small, and I am so grateful that you all are back with me today. I'm really excited about this episode because in this episode, we are going to be talking about working in your strengths to optimize your performance. You may be asking, what are strengths? And why do I have to optimize my performance? And I am going to tell you why. This is something that's so important to me, and I'm really excited to share my knowledge with you. We're going to talk about my strengths, how I'm able to work within them, and we're going to learn. We are going to learn a lot today, and I'm just really excited that you all are joining me once again. So let's get started. So today we are going to be talking about strengths. And what I'm specifically going to be talking about are the Clifton Strengths. So the Clifton Strengths are strengths that you find out about yourself via an assessment. I don't necessarily want to say that I love assessments, but what I do look for with assessments is how accurate and how valid they are. One, from a research perspective, and two, from just how accurate they are as it relates to me and what I actually know about myself. So when we talk about the Clifton Strengths, and for those that are watching, I'm going to link it. I'm also going to link it in the show notes. There are 34 strengths, right? And when you take the assessment, you can either take an assessment to get your top 10, your top 5, or your top 10. And then I think the full is the top you're 34, not the top, just your 34. So what you generally look at are your top 5 strengths. And my 5 are deliberative, achiever, relator, intellection, and strategic. And I will go into a little more detail about what they are, but what I first want to talk about is why it's important to work in your strengths. So just some context, right? You have what you would consider a talent, if you will, and that's kind of like your natural way of thinking, believing, behaving. And then you have your strengths, right? And your strengths it's the doing part. It's what you actually do. And when you're able to work in your strengths, you are essentially able to almost all the time really bust out like perfect performance, if you will. It's important to be able to work in your strengths because when you do what you do and you do it the best way possible, the absolute best way possible, there is no reason why you cannot get amazing results, right? So I talked about my strength. So my first strength is deliberative. And deliberative is really being deliberate, taking time to think about the things that you are doing and the actions that you are taking. My second strength is achiever, and achiever is wanting to do your absolute best. And I can't tell you all, this is so me. It really is so me. But taking the time to learn, wanting to learn as much as possible. My third strength is relator, and that's how I build relationships. And for me, I build the best relationships when they are one-on-one. I take the time to get to know people. If you know me, I always talk about how I don't use the term friend lightly. And it takes so much for any one individual to come into my circle, to get into my space, because I take that time, I'm deliberate, I take that time to get to know you, and as a relator, I want to get to know you on a much deeper level. My fourth strength is intellection, and intellection is that really deep thought. I love having intellectual, deeply rooted conversations. The other part of me, the other part of the intellection is because I thrive in those kinds of conversations. Small talk is very hard for me. If it's not deep, if it's not intellectual, my brain is just kind of like, I don't know if this is the right space for us to be in. We're not using our brain power, and we need to use our brain power. And so my fifth is strategic. And strategic is, I am very good at, here's the problem, I am good at identifying all of the possible solutions, all of the ways forward from your best to your worst. I can help you identify the absolute best path to take. And like, my mind does that really, really quickly. So why am I telling you all of this? And what does this have to do with optimizing your performance and just being great at what you do? So I will use myself, the only example, or the best example, if you will. I will use myself as an example. So I am an executive in human resources, right? So when we think about my top 5 strengths, first, we'll talk about deliberative. When you are responsible for the livelihood of people, building people, educating people, making sure people are well, you don't just make decisions all willy-nilly, if you will, right? Does that make sense? So being deliberate is very important for me in that role. Having the opportunity to say, okay, let's sit and let's think about this first before we take any actions, is very important, because you want to make sure that you're making the right decision, whether it's the right decision for the organization or if it's the right decision for the employee, right? Second is intellection. Intellection is that, my second is achiever. So thinking about achiever and wanting to make sure that things are done right. I'm sorry, but if you know any human resources person that's just kind of like, all right, whatever, I don't care, I'm just going to do this wrong, I don't care what happens. They're terrible at their job. They do not need to be responsible for the well-being of people anywhere, let alone an organization, their livelihoods, whatever it is. They don't need to be responsible for it. So when I think about achiever, I think about really making sure that I know everything that I need to know to do my job well, to have the opportunity to get it right and make sure I get it right all of the time, because people's livelihoods, they rely on me and my team and the job that we do. The well-being of the organization relies on my ability to do my job and get things done the right way. Third is relator and building relationships. So quick story, I was going through my strengths because I decided that I wanted to be a Gallup strengths coach. That achiever part of me. And, I thought about how that would actually do for what I could do for my organization and just in general for myself, for my private coaching clients, to have this skill. And so there are 34 strengths, if you will. And my number 34, and I joked about this with a supervisor of mine, my number 34, I hate to say this, but my number 34, which is my lowest strength, is empathy. Now, one might ask, how on earth am I in a job whose sole responsibility is to help people, connect with them, help them thrive? And my lowest strength is empathy. I was actually worried about that. But one thing that you learn when it comes to your strengths is how do you utilize your top strengths to compensate for your lower strengths. So wherein you would think empathy is a requirement for me to be excellent at my job, it's actually not. Why? Because I have Relator. And with Relator, the Relator is about building relationships and the way in which I build the best relationships. And for me, I do that one-on-one. And what I have learned, and this is without even knowing what this actually was, that this was a Relator strength, is every time I interacted with an employee, it was always on a one-on-one. Even if it was just kind of like, hey, how you doing? Getting to know them. I made it my business to get to know every single employee where I could on a one-to-one basis and build a relationship with them so that they knew that if there was an issue that they could come to me. HR always gets a bad rep, and I know everyone has had an experience with their HR department in some organizations that they worked for where there was a lack of trust, where HR wasn't friendly, where they just kind of processed paperwork. And I've never been that type of person. I've never been that type of HR person where it was just kind of like, yeah, we're just gonna push paper. We don't care about employees. It's just kind of whatever. Never been me. Never been me at all. So I take the time to build relationships with the employees of the organization that I work with, regardless of why they're coming to see me. I think about it in terms of the relationships that I have with my colleagues as well. That deliberative is just kind of, we need time. We got to sit here. We have to think about it. And that is related to people as well. Anytime I engage with anyone, before I engage, is kind of like, okay, why do I want to engage with this person? How do I want to engage with this person? What is the benefit of engaging with this person? Do I want this person in my space? How much time do I want this person in my space? I literally go through that whole entire process with everything. And we'll talk about why that may not actually be good, even though that's a strength of mine. Sorry, I digress. Back to Relator. So my Relator strength helps me compensate for having a lower strength of empathy. So Relator for me is number 3, empathy for me is number 34. And in building those relationships with people, empathy develops. There's a different level of understanding when you have the time to work with people one-on-one. So now my 4th strength is intellection. And that I talked about was the very deep thought process and wanting to engage on a different level, having those intellectual conversations. I thrive on that. And before I even knew about strengths, all of those things, when I think about the conversations that I have with people and why they have been meaningful and why once I part, whether I meet someone once and we talk or we have an extended relationship, there's always this feeling of there was value in time spent. There was value in the time they spent with me. There was value in the time I spent with them. We both felt like there was value and that we would love to be able to do that again and build a relationship and have deeper conversations. And lastly is strategic. To be quite honest, I think strategic is my absolute favorite because I love to sit down and think of just kind of like, all right, what are all of our options? What are all of the possible solutions? What are all of the roads that we can take to whatever destination it is that I set, that I'm helping you set, that I'm helping employees set, that I'm helping client set? There are so many different scenarios, and once we identify what all of them are, what's the best one? And let's take the best route to reach your goal, to reach your destination, to identify the best possible solution to your problem, whatever that is. So as an HR person, right, I I have to be strategic. I have to think about all of the different ways things can go, all of the situations, good, bad, in between. And if you are in human resources, I'm sorry to say this, but some folks act all kinds of crazy. They act all kinds of crazy at work. Some managers act all kinds of crazy and act all kinds of crazy at work. So my role is to say, okay, this is a crazy situation. What are our possible options? Let's look at all of them. What's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? Let's find the best case so that we make the best decision for everyone involved. And as I think about my career and all of the things that I've done, and I'm a career HR leader. I've literally been in HR since internship in college when I was 19. I'm well above 19, so I've been doing this for quite a while. But when I think about it and I think about my strengths and the opportunities that I've had to really just work in them, I've made change. I've made change in the organizations that I work for, and I've really had an amazing career. And I think, yes, to some degree, I'm tooting my own horn, but if you think about all of the great managers that I've had in my career, they will tell you that when you just let me do my thing, they have no worries. It's literally like, here are our people. do what you will with them. And that's really been great. And when you work in your strengths and you do what you love to do, what you enjoy doing, there's a certain level of fulfillment that you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anywhere else. So all of that being said, there's always going to be another side to things, if you will, right? So when we talk about Gallup strengths, they have what you call balconies and what you call basements. Not sure if that's the terminology that they still use, but that's the terminology they used to use. So we're going to use that terminology. So when you think about your balconies, it's really like in your strengths, doing your thing, and you are just excelling at it. However, your strengths can have basements too. And so what your basements are the traps. It's the traps that your strengths can lay for you. And I'll give you an example. I'll give an example of deliberative, which is my first strength. Taking the time to think, to just be in my thoughts and needing time to be in my thoughts. It's a good thing because I want to make the best decision. The basement to that is I will literally sit there and just think. I will think about everything and I won't do jack because I'm just sitting there thinking and mulling and wondering and pondering and what to do. And it's kind of like, all right, that's great, but girl, you got to actually do something, right? Achiever. I want to do great work. I want to accomplish my goals. But my basement, I literally want to do everything all the time. Girl, you can't do everything. And sometimes I have to sit there and say, Wajida, you cannot do everything. Focus on a handful of things that you can be intentional about, that you can actually execute on. And we'll do a whole nother episode on the themes in terms of strategic and relationship building and all of those things, because the vast majority of my themes are in strategic, which is great, but you also need execution. And I struggle with that. Let's work it out, but we need to do. And so my basements, if you will, as it relates to being deliberative is I sit there and think, and I take all the time thinking, and I don't execute. right? And that's this, when I think about achiever, right? My basement is wanting to do everything and learn everything and be an expert at everything. Can't happen. Nobody can. However, my mentor, who I absolutely love, has always told me you should know something about everything and everything about something. But be realistic about it. And sometimes I am not realistic, which is why I am in the middle of getting my certification to be a Gallup Strengths coach. And it's taking me a while because I was like, ooh, I want to do this too. My achiever, there are lots of squirrel moments when it comes to me being an achiever. As it relates to being a relator, I think in just taking the time and doing the one-on-one, there are some times where I miss out on opportunities with people, and I think that's meeting new people and being open to other people. And I honestly think that's a combination of the deliberative strengths, the deliberative and the relator is kind of like, I got to think about this relationship. I have to think about whether or not I want to engage in this relationship. Do I want to be in this space? And sometimes just kind of like, take a leap, jump. You never know who you're going to meet. So I have to be very careful about that. Intellection, I talked about like the small talk. Small talk everywhere is important because that's how you build relationships, right? That's how you get to know people. And when I think about me wanting to just always have intellectual conversations, you can't jump into that, right? You can't just be like, okay, what do you think about this situation in this part of the world? Sometimes it really is, so how was your weekend? How are your kids? Did you get, did you see that rain last night? Is everything okay? How was vacation? If you're always thinking that next level, you miss out on this level here. This lower level, the level that's going to get you in to getting to know someone, right? And then when I think about strategic, and this is specifically in combination with my deliberative, it's that kind of, all right, this is every possible scenario. And with the strategic thinking, I'm going to channel my therapist, God bless her soul for dealing with me and everything. Anyway, she said that I am a catastrophizer. And what that means is I always go to that worst case scenario. Partly true. As it relates to just things happening in my life, I think I focus on the worst case scenario, which is a basement of mine. However, that's not the only thing I have to think about. However, I do have to be considerate of that basement and focusing on that catastrophe, that worst case scenario, if you will, and not getting stuck in it. And to be quite honest, sometimes I just get stuck in it. So I have to be careful. I do realize though that when it comes to work, I'm a bit more intentional about staying in the balcony, but I have to be as intentional about the balconies when it comes to life, right? And so when I talk about optimal performance, it's just not about work. It's performing optimally in your life in every aspect of it, whether it is your relationship, whether it is your job, whether it is your personal growth and development. It really is being able to optimize yourself all of the time the right way and being conscious of not only the good things that come out of it, but the things that could hold you back, right? Those basements, if you will. So I'm very conscious of that, and I am working really, really hard at being so much better at that as it relates to my personal life. So, what does this all mean for you? A couple of things. First, I highly recommend that you take the Gallup Strengths. And shameless plug, if you want me to help you work through it, let's have a call. Call is free, just to talk about an introductory. Let's talk about what it is that you need help with that I can help you with, because that's what I love to do. And we can talk about the Gallup Strengths. There is a cost to it unless you take it as a part of an assessment through your job or a coaching program. It's a nominal cost. It's a great investment if you really want to learn about yourself. Second, once you identify what your strengths are, know what your balconies are and know what your basements are. Third, be intentional about really working in your strengths and optimizing your performance. I think I said this in episode 1 of this season. When you're working in your purpose, doing the thing that you absolutely love, and you can work in your strengths, life is so sweet. Life is so sweet. And that's where I'm trying to get back to, because I was there. Y'all, I was there for so long. And then that balcony just like, nah, we keeping you down here. We're locking the door. You're not getting out. And it kept me from doing so many things, including this amazing podcast. But we are back. And so those are the main 3 things. There are so much more. And I would love to continue this conversation. And we will continue this conversation, because this is one of the assessments that I have taken that I think is the best for anyone to take, in terms of accuracy, in terms of validity, in terms of really just helping you tell the story about how amazing you are and how you can work constantly in all of your gifts and your talents and, again, optimize your performance. I am going to link everything in the show notes and the comments. I'm going to link the website for the Gallup Strengths. I am going to provide the descriptions for my strengths that we just talked about. I am going to, of course, link you to my website just in case you want to have a chat with me. And I'm going to try to do my best. And whatever information I think is relevant, I am going to share with you all. And so that is all that we have for today. I am so glad that you have allowed me to share this space with you. I cannot wait to have more conversations with you about working in your strengths, just being excellent at, let me rephrase, I don't say being excellent at everything, but really being excellent at everything you do, or trying to be as excellent as possible and really just going for it, because we all have, it's within us all. We just need to know what we're strong at and really stay in those so that we can just achieve the best that we can for ourselves in work, in school, in life, in relationships, in everything. So I will catch you all next time. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. It has been great sharing this space with you. I hope that you have taken what you've needed so you can share what you've learned, and that you are on your way to living, learning, and leading with purpose. I encourage you to stay connected with me. Please remember to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can also follow us on Instagram at Leading with Purpose Podcast. And don't forget to visit my website, www.wajitasmall.com, where you can subscribe to my mailing list. Till next time.